You can have a watch.
I can have a watch. If I retire in 25 years, I can have a watch too.
He was the mustached heartthrob of the 1980s, a cultural icon, a face so recognizable it defined an entire generation of television. But at the very peak of his fame, when Magnum P.I. was dominating the airwaves, Tom Selleck nearly walked away without warning. No farewell tour, no goodbye episode, just gone. Why? What could possibly push the star of a hit show to the brink like that? The pressure, the betrayal, and a moment that broke him behind the scenes. And now, after decades of silence, the truth is finally coming out. When Magnum P.I. premiered in 1980, it catapulted Tom Selleck into a level of fame that few actors ever reach. He was not just a television star, he was a phenomenon. The rugged charm, the iconic mustache, the red Ferrari, the effortless charisma. It was the role of a lifetime, and for millions of viewers, it felt like Tom Selleck was living the dream. But inside, something very different was happening. The show's success came fast and hard. Within its first season, it became a television staple, dominating ratings and defining primetime cool. And with that success came an enormous weight. Selleck was not just acting in Magnum P.I., he was carrying it. As the leading man, nearly every scene revolved around him. That meant waking up before dawn, working 16-hour days, and staying under the Hawaiian sun until the light was gone. He rarely had a moment to himself. What was once exciting quickly turned into something suffocating. The physical toll was relentless. Although Selleck had been an athlete and was in excellent shape, the pace of filming and the volume of stunts began to chip away at him. He developed tendinitis in his arms, and there were days when dehydration left him lightheaded. Stunt work, running scenes, fight choreography. He insisted on doing as much as he could himself, but the cost was high. Crew members later recalled how he would push through visible pain with barely a complaint, his hands shaking between takes. His body was screaming for rest, but the schedule never let up. And then there was the emotional cost. Hollywood success had its perks, but it was isolating. Friends back home faded into the background. He missed weddings, family birthdays, even funerals. His romantic relationships suffered. Magnum consumed everything: time, energy, even identity. One day bled into the next. In one candid interview, he admitted, "There was Tom, and then there was Magnum. And I forgot who I was supposed to be." He became a prisoner of his own success. The paradise setting only made the disconnect more painful. While tourists laughed and played outside his window, he was locked in a cycle of call times, scripts, and silent exhaustion. He said he would sometimes stand on the beach between takes and just stare at the water. Not for the view, but for the silence. It was the only moment that felt real, he once confessed. But that feeling of entrapment was just the beginning. Because while his body broke down and his mind wore thin, something else began to unravel behind the scenes. Something that felt far more personal. Something he never saw coming. And once it happened, there was no going back. By the time Magnum P.I. had settled into its second season, CBS knew they had something special. Ratings were sky high. Merchandising was booming. And Tom Selleck's face was plastered everywhere, from billboards to cereal boxes. But while fans saw a laid-back hero cracking jokes in Hawaiian shirts, the network saw something else entirely. A cash machine they had no intention of loosening their grip on. Tom had signed an ironclad contract in the early days, before Magnum was the hit it would become. Back then, he had little leverage. But now, with the show topping the charts and his star on the rise, he started to feel trapped. CBS refused to renegotiate terms, and worse, they actively blocked him from taking on other opportunities. And that included the one role that could have changed everything: Indiana Jones. Yes, Tom Selleck was the original choice for Raiders of the Lost Ark. Steven Spielberg and George Lucas wanted him. He screen-tested, he nailed it, but CBS said no. They enforced a clause that restricted him from working on any other project that conflicted with the Magnum shooting schedule. Even though filming had not officially started yet, the network would not budge. Harrison Ford got the role, and the rest is movie history. But for Tom, that rejection was personal. It was not just about a missed opportunity. It was about control. The network treated him less like a creative partner and more like property. He was expected to smile for interviews, shoot promotional material on his days off, and appear at endless press events, many unpaid, many unrequested. According to insiders, there was even pressure for him to maintain a very specific public image: clean-cut, all-American, apolitical. Any deviation from that was met with immediate pushback from executives. Behind closed doors, Tom started to feel like a prisoner. As he later put it, "They gave me everything I ever dreamed of, and then they made me afraid to use it." Even offers for blockbuster films had to be cleared through CBS, and they were almost always rejected. There were whispers he was being punished for becoming too powerful, too big for a network show. The studio feared that if he did too well elsewhere, he might leave, and so they kept him in a box. The situation weighed on him more heavily with each passing year. He began to talk about quitting, not in front of cameras, but to trusted colleagues and close friends. He would ask questions like, "Is the money worth my life?" Or, "What happens when I finally say no?" At first, those around him thought he was just venting, but over time, it became clear. This was not frustration, it was desperation. And then, just when he needed loyalty the most, someone close to him made a move he never saw coming. A move that would not only deepen his exhaustion, but fracture his trust on set completely. While the pressure from CBS was steadily eroding Tom Selleck's sense of freedom, it was what happened within his own circle that hurt the most. Because as exhausting as the studio system had become, Selleck still believed in loyalty, especially among the cast and crew he worked with every single day. That is what made what happened next so deeply personal. During the middle seasons of Magnum P.I., rumors began to circulate that not everyone on set was rooting for Selleck. Most cast members got along well with him. He was known for being respectful, professional, and generous. But one relationship slowly turned sour: his dynamic with co-star Larry Manetti, who played Rick. At first, there were no issues. The two shared scenes, laughs, and interviews without any visible tension. But, as the show progressed, industry insiders started whispering that Manetti had grown resentful of his supporting role. He wanted more lines, more screen time, and more creative input. And rather than discuss it openly, he allegedly started lobbying behind Selleck's back, speaking with producers and pitching storylines that reduced Magnum's centrality in favor of expanding Rick's arc. According to crew members, subtle changes began to appear in the scripts. Magnum's scenes were trimmed here and there, while supporting characters gained more standalone moments. At first, Selleck chalked it up to creative evolution. But then came a moment he could not ignore. One day on set, Selleck overheard a heated conversation between a producer and a writer, arguing over a proposed script revision that would dramatically reduce Magnum's presence in an upcoming episode. The change had not come from the network. It had allegedly come from Manetti himself, who had pitched the revision during a private dinner with producers the week before. When Selleck asked for clarification, he was met with silence and side glances. That was when he realized someone close to him had gone behind his back. To say he felt betrayed is an understatement. This was not just a colleague. This was someone he had championed from the start, fought for in contract negotiations, and helped elevate in the press. And now that person had tried to undermine him, quietly, methodically, and without a word of warning. Tension between the two grew thick on set. Though both remained professional on camera, insiders say that by season 5, their off-screen relationship had completely fractured. They would sit at opposite ends of the table reads. They would avoid eye contact between takes. And any moments of camaraderie that once existed were now replaced with silence and avoidance. For Selleck, who was already feeling the crushing weight of the industry's demands, this was the final emotional blow. He had sacrificed his health, his time, and his freedom to carry the show. And now, even within the walls of that very production, he felt betrayed. The set no longer felt like home. It felt like enemy territory. And yet, even this was not the breaking point. That moment was still coming. And when it did, it would stop filming in its tracks and nearly end the show forever. By the time Magnum P.I. reached its 5th season, the cracks were no longer hidden. Tom Selleck was still delivering on screen, still charming, still powerful, but something behind those famous eyes had changed. The weight of fame, the physical wear and tear, and the betrayal behind the scenes had begun to hollow him out. And though fans could not see it, the man who had once carried the show with pride was now struggling just to make it through the day. People who worked on set began to notice a shift. Selleck, once known for his upbeat energy and leadership, became quieter, more withdrawn. Between scenes, he would sit alone, sometimes in total silence, staring at the floor or into the distance. Some days, he would go entire afternoons without speaking unless the camera was rolling. What had once been a tight-knit cast started to drift apart, held together only by contracts and routine. There were reports that Selleck had begun taking long walks alone around the perimeter of the filming locations, not for exercise, not to rehearse lines, just to be alone. Crew members described him as haunted, like someone carrying a weight far heavier than anyone realized. The fame that millions envied had become a cage. He once said in an interview, "You spend so long pretending to be someone else, you start forgetting who you are." Behind the scenes, producers became concerned, not about his mental well-being, but about the show's future. There was too much money on the line, too many sponsors, too many expectations. When Selleck started arriving late or asking for script rewrites to lessen his load, it was seen as a problem to fix, not a person to help. He was treated like a product wearing down, not a human being in crisis. There were rumors, never confirmed, that Tom had begun leaning on alcohol just to take the edge off. Others said he barely slept and was developing chronic insomnia from the constant pressure. One crew member later told a biographer that Selleck would sometimes sit in his trailer for hours after shooting wrapped, just staring at a wall. Not sad, not angry, just gone. It was during this period that a particularly dark shift occurred. After a long day on set, Selleck reportedly left the location abruptly, without explanation. His trailer was still open, script pages scattered, costume half-folded. No one knew where he had gone. Some believed he had finally reached his breaking point. That night, shooting was halted. Everyone waited. When he returned the next morning, he did not speak about where he had been. In that moment, the production team realized just how fragile things had become. Tom Selleck was still standing, but just barely. And while they scrambled to keep things running, he was already making decisions in his mind. Quiet, serious decisions that would change everything. Because what happened next would not just shake the set. It would bring filming to a halt and nearly cost Magnum P.I. its leading man forever. It was supposed to be just another episode, another day in paradise. But the moment Tom Selleck read the script, he knew something was wrong. The episode, set deep into season 5, called for Magnum to confront a deeply personal trauma, a flashback sequence that would force the character to relive a painful military experience. The scenes were dark, emotionally intense, and, at least in Selleck's eyes, manipulative. He felt they were designed not to deepen the character, but to wring emotion out of him at a time when he was already emotionally drained. Still, he tried. Always the professional, Tom arrived on set that day prepared. But the weight of the scene, combined with everything he had been carrying, was too much. As the cameras rolled and he stepped into the moment, something inside him just broke. In the middle of the take, with the crew watching and the director urging him to go deeper, Selleck stopped mid-sentence, stood up, and walked off set without a word. Everyone froze. At first, people thought it was a joke. Tom was known for his dry sense of humor, his quiet exits, his no-drama attitude, but this was different. There was no smirk, no signal. He simply left. No explanation, no return. The director was furious. CBS executives were notified within the hour. What started as confusion quickly turned into panic. The show's anchor had vanished during a key production day. And with so much money and scheduling on the line, the stakes were enormous. That night, CBS representatives flew to Hawaii. This was not a standard HR issue. It was a full-blown emergency. According to production insiders, the network offered him a series of concessions just to get him back on set. A break in the shooting schedule, control over how emotionally heavy scenes were written, even the promise of more say in the creative direction of his character. They were ready to do anything to keep him from quitting, and they knew they had pushed him too far. But what few people realized was that Tom Selleck had not simply walked off set in a moment of frustration. He had reached the edge. That single episode had tapped into something too raw, too close to home. The line between Tom and Magnum had disappeared, and in that moment, he could not pretend anymore. When he finally returned 2 days later, he was changed, quiet, guarded. The man who had once led the show with energy and openness now moved like someone walking through water. He finished the episode, yes, but something had shifted. For him, this was not just a temporary burnout. It was a warning shot to everyone around him. He was not invincible. He was not bulletproof, and CBS knew it. So, in the aftermath, they made him an offer that went far beyond scripts and scheduling. An offer that exposed just how desperate they were to keep their star, and just how close they had come to losing him for good. When Tom Selleck walked back onto the Magnum P.I. set after his abrupt departure, the atmosphere had changed. The crew was tense, the producers were nervous, and the network? They were in full damage control mode. Behind closed doors, CBS executives had come to a startling realization. They had pushed their most valuable asset to the edge, and if they did not act fast, they might lose him completely. What followed was a series of private negotiations that most fans never knew about. The first offer was money, a substantial bonus meant to compensate for the emotional strain he had endured. But Selleck was never just chasing paychecks. He wanted time, space, and creative control, things that had been systematically denied to him for years. So, CBS sweetened the deal. They offered him more say over the scripts. If a storyline felt too emotionally exploitative or personally invasive, he could veto it. That alone gave him a level of freedom he had never experienced during the early seasons. Next, they promised a lighter shooting schedule. No more back-to-back 16-hour days. He would have planned breaks, time to recover, and breathing room between major story arcs. To Selleck, this was a start, but it was still not enough. He had been strung along before. He had been promised things that quietly vanished when the spotlight moved elsewhere. So, he demanded something more concrete. That is when the studio made their boldest promise. After Magnum P.I. wrap, CBS would greenlight a major feature film with Selleck in the lead. It would be a chance to pivot into the movie career he had been denied when they blocked his Indiana Jones opportunity. This film would be his redemption, a Hollywood vehicle with his name at the top of the poster. On paper, it was the kind of offer that could reignite any actor's passion. But Selleck had learned to be cautious. He took the deal, yes, but deep down, he had doubts. He had heard similar promises before, and too many of them came with hidden strings. Sure enough, after Magnum ended its run, the film project quietly disappeared. Studio interest waned. Scripts were shelved. Meetings were postponed. Eventually, the entire idea was abandoned, leaving Selleck once again holding a promise that had dissolved in silence. Still, he returned to set and gave the show what it needed to survive. He fulfilled his contract, carried the series through to its final seasons, and kept his word to the fans who had stuck with him. But those final years were not fueled by passion. They were fueled by endurance. He showed up because it was his job, because walking away would have hurt the cast, the crew, and the millions of people who still saw him as Magnum. But inside, something had changed forever. He no longer trusted the network. He no longer saw Hollywood as a dream factory. And with every episode he filmed, the thought lingered. What would have happened if I had left that day and never come back? What he did after the show ended would surprise everyone. And for a while, it looked like Tom Selleck might never return to the spotlight again. When Magnum P.I. ended in 1988, Tom Selleck did not chase the spotlight. He disappeared. No farewell tour, no next big role, just silence. Instead of Hollywood, he chose solitude, retreating to a quiet avocado ranch tucked into the California hills. For nearly 2 years, he turned down every script, every interview, and every public appearance. He was done. Why? Because fame had taken too much. It had drained him, broken his body, frayed his spirit, and pushed him into emotional isolation. And when the cameras stopped rolling, he realized he did not know who he was without the mustache, the Ferrari, and the lines on a page. So he worked the land. He planted, he repaired fences, he drove a tractor instead of a convertible, and slowly he became human again. In a rare interview years later, he finally said it out loud. I did not almost quit. I did quit, in my heart, but they would not let me. Tom Selleck paid the price for being Magnum, and though he eventually returned to acting, he never let the industry consume him again. Today, he is remembered not just for the character he played, but for the quiet strength of a man who walked away, when walking away was the hardest thing to do.